as Trevor Sikkema joins us right now. You can follow him on Twitter at Tampa Bay Trey. As mentioned, the lead NFL draft analyst for Pro Football Focus. And, Trevor, we are one as I don't know if it's a society or if it's a sports thing, but when somebody is up on that pedestal, we try to knock them off said pedestal, and that leads me to Caleb Williams. And he is, the overwhelming favorite to go number one. I still think he will go number one. When you evaluate Caleb Williams, Trevor, do you see some issues there, and could you make an argument for Drake May or Jaden Daniels to be the top quarterback in this draft?
Oh, there's no question about it. I don't know if we're quite there with Jaden Daniels yet. He's definitely been gaining some steam, and I think there's a very real possibility that he could be QB3 in this draft and the third quarterback off the board. But I don't think he's in that conversation with those two guys yet, Drake May and Caleb Williams. But for Williams versus May, there's certainly a debate that's happening right now, and I think that as we get closer, you're going to see a lot of teams. I don't know if it's going to be evenly split, but there are going to be teams that prefer Drake May, and maybe it's less of preferring May and more of just scared of what it could be with Caleb Williams, because there's no doubt about it. He's got to take care of the ball better. Over those first 2 years of him starting as a true freshman and as a true sophomore, he was this Superman, right? He could do no wrong. He was this ultimate improviser, this incredible creator, the Mahomes of college football, they called him. And then this year, he tried to do those things yet again, and he got burned for him, really, for the first time in his college career. So we saw Superman hit his kryptonite, I think, for the first time with Caleb Williams. And he's got to play in structure a lot better. When things are right in front of him, when the game plan is right there, hey, there's a guy over the middle. You don't need to leave the pocket. You don't need to improvise. You don't need to hold on to the ball for so long. Like, all of these things are correctable, but there's no guarantee that they do get corrected. So taking care of the ball more, being able to play inside a structure, not having as high of a time to throw average as he does, just being a quicker decision maker, that's something that he needs to do to be the pro that a lot of people think that he could be. So there's a little bit of a projection with as good as he is, and I think that there is absolutely a debate for who should go number one.
Well, it's kind of funny, Trevor, because last year everyone was hot and heavy on Bryce Young, and he ended up going one, and we heard a lot of information heading into draft night that C.J. Stroud was going to drop, that Will Levis was completely off the board. It's kind of funny how those two guys, Stroud and Levis, who were kind of afterthoughts going into draft night, I don't want to say afterthoughts, but not viewed as the top guy, have ended up performing vastly better during the early parts of their NFL careers. Do you see that playing out with Caleb Williams? Is his bust potential higher because of some of these inconsistencies, or are we just not looking at it through the right frame?
No, I think that what Caleb Williams is doing right now this season, and I would say the faults that we have from him from the 2023 tape, they are things that are legitimate concerns. You have to be able to process things quicker. He's holding on to the ball. I'll give you guys some stats to it. He's held on to the ball over the last 2 years at a time to throw average of 3.44 this year, and it was 3.21 last year, I believe. And with those numbers, there wasn't a single quarterback last year outside of Justin Fields who held on to the ball for more than 3 seconds. And we've got 2 years of data that's not only right around 3 seconds for Caleb Williams, it's way over 3 seconds. I mean, that half a second extra, that's an eternity in the NFL. So, those are things that you look at what he does and who he is as a quarterback, that it has to get better. It just has, and I'm not saying that it can't. We've seen him operate with quicker time to throws before, but if he does not fix that, if he has this kind of Superman complex about him where he's always got to extend it past the pocket and he's got to hold on to the ball for a lot longer, and maybe these tendencies that he's learned at USC, he takes that to the NFL. He's going to struggle. So there's no question about it. I don't know if I'd use the word bust. You could if you wanted to. I think it's a little harsh for how good he is and how much he brings things to the table. But there's no doubt about it that his floor right now, relative to what it was at the beginning of the season before we saw him this year, is a lot lower than I think people were willing to admit or even would have admitted before the season started.
Trevor Sikkema joining us here on VSiN Primetime, lead NFL draft analyst for Pro Football Focus. When you look at this draft, and we're still so far away, and your busy season has started and it will continue for the next handful of months. You mentioned Jaden Daniels in your most recent mock. You have him now in the top 10. And, a prop that we always discuss and always gets a lot of discussion is how many quarterbacks will go in the first round, Trevor. And last year, everybody was hot and heavy on Hendon Hooker, and the over-under was, I believe, 4.5, and ultimately the under cashed. When you look at this draft class, and if we can securely put Jaden Daniels in the first round, which I think is fair to say, who do you think are quarterbacks that could potentially sneak in to the first round? And ultimately, how many do you think, and I'm not holding you to the fire now, but how many do you think go in the first round?
Yeah, I mean, if you go along those same number, like let's use 4.5, right? Let's say the first two guys probably go 1 and 2 off the board. Let's say Jaden Daniels is probably going to be a first-round pick wherever it's going to be. Okay, now you're flirting with these next two guys. Okay, you probably get one more quarterback in. Do you get to that fifth? And I think that there's really 3 names, maybe 4, that could be considered for first-round picks. Bo Nix is one of them, and I think that Bo Nix has had great seasons over these last 2 years at Oregon. He's a little bit older of a prospect, but he's somebody who understands the process of offenses very, very well. He's a fantastic facilitator, but I also think he's a guy who gives you a lot of stuff with his arms and his legs. So he's a dual threat kind of a player too. I think he can be a back end of the first round guy. I ultimately think that he would be that next player in the 4. And then you've got 3 kind of players who, depending on who you ask, there's some that tell you, oh yeah, absolutely, they're going to go in the first round. And others will tell you, whoa, yeah, maybe not. Those 3 are J.J. McCarthy from Michigan, Quinn Ewers from Texas, and then Shedeur Sanders from Colorado. I'll start with Shedeur because I'm just not sure he even is in this class coming up. I think that a lot of people feel like he's going to go back to Colorado. So if you take his name out of it for that reason, then you've got Quinn Ewers and J.J. McCarthy. Both of those guys have NFL caliber arms, but both of them don't necessarily operate the pocket the way that an NFL quarterback needs to. The decision-making is a little bit slow. The ball placement's not exactly what it needs to be. There's some issues with consistency when it comes to the touch on their passes. When those guys are throwing the fastball, I mean, they look as good as anybody does. But you got to be able to do a lot more than that to succeed at the NFL level. So those would be the players. I say if you throw Bo Nix in there to get you 4, those 2 guys are probably the next in line. And then Michael Penix Jr., I love him, but the injury history, the age, I don't know if the NFL is going to believe that guy's a first-round pick. So, those are the guys that I bring to the table.
Trevor, before we let you run, we don't have enough time to really get down on it, but 10-second answer, first non-quarterback, is it a lock, Marvin Harrison?
Yeah, it's a lock, Marvin Harrison. I mean, I just got done with his regular season film review, and he's probably going to have one of the highest, if not the highest, film grade that I've ever had doing this full time. So that's how good this guy is.
He's the lead NFL draft analyst over at PFF. Great work at Tampa Bay Trey on Twitter. Trevor, appreciate it, man. We'll talk to you soon.
Of course, guys, anytime.
There he is, Trevor Sikkema. Great stuff from him.
Go to VSiN.com/subscribe to become a VSiN Pro subscriber today.